power of life and death lies within the tongue. We're going to discuss how sharing your story can help others, and sometimes saying one thing can be the straw that really changes the world and that person's life. Your story is worth sharing. No matter how ugly, no matter how horrific and traumatic. Unless you're really talking to a child, if you got another fellow friend or adult or even acquaintance that's going through a tough time, telling them about how you went through a tough time can make all the difference in their world, to make them have hope and even direct them to faith and belief. And it gets them through. Even if your life is pitch perfect, you can take that and show other people, like, as an example. Don't brag on it, but just say, hey, you could have this. If you really try hard, you could have this. You reap the rewards of what you sow. So if you sow, crap, you're going to get crap out of it. You're probably going to starve. But if you sow good fruits and good seed, and you grow a crop and you feed everybody, not just your family, but everybody gets a piece of that. So that's what your life is about. Every piece of your life is made to be shared. If it wasn't shared, then other people would be missing out on a blessing, and they might not even know how to heal themselves, because how can they heal themselves when they think that nobody in the world has been through what they've been through and understand it the way they do, and firsthand knowledge of what it's like to feel pain? So if you don't have the will to share it, write it down. Talk to your neighbor, talk to your mom, talk to somebody. Get used to the idea of telling somebody about what happened to you. But even if it's all good things, then it's still worth sharing. The fun is worth sharing. Laughing is contagious. So is yawning. It's a way we communicate, I believe. But what's really important is share the happiness. Happiness just begets more happiness. How can you be sad out of happiness, or angry, or pain? It doesn't work like that. So if you're telling somebody a happy story, only positive things can come out of it. So share that story. It's awesome. You're awesome. You're very special. Each and every one of you are special. We're uniquely and individually made, all descended from the first ancestral particles, which was produced from a particle of thought of what we call God. God had a particle of thought that gave birth to the first particles of the universe, and they were X and Y. And they had collided together, made the Big Bang, and the spark happened, and that was the light that we had. So, and the creation. So, and then the heavens, and then the angels. So, anyway, if somebody is neglected the chance to hear a story that could help them in life, it's hard to handle once you find out that, oh my God, I could help that person, like share my experience, what I went through. I made it, but they, all of a sudden, they get so down and out on themselves, thinking that nobody knows. It's like this song that says, how do you get so lonely and nobody know, that you decide to take your own life and exchange it for the one you could have had, to know life. So that's why I've stressed this so much, share your story, because if you don't, somebody might be able to be blessed out of it and heal themselves, get up out of their bed and be able to go to work or something, or go take care of their family, instead of just lay there and, cry and wallow in it and just think that nobody understands. So those of you that need God to understand you, that's great. But it's the most important too, is to understand each other and have inspiration for each other, because we're here. God's with us, but we're here with another person, and all humanity is going through something similar. I'm not saying anybody's situation is worse than another person's situation. Honestly, your storm could be 10 feet wide and feel the same impact as a big old hurricane that's miles wide. So understandably, that different levels of different pain is same across the board. Just like how God weighs sin all the same. It doesn't matter if you murder somebody or if you say a curse word. He levels it the same. But it also says that all sins shall be forgiven, including slander, except for the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. So that'll get you thinking too. But that doesn't mean go out there and do something to hurt somebody. I say the 10 Commandments could be summed up by this one saying. Love yourself, love others, don't hurt yourself, and don't hurt others. So it's like love yourself and everybody else, and don't do harm to yourself or them. That's a good way to get through life. Just be happy. Be positive, be productive. Even if you've been through hell or not, it's worth it sharing your story, because you're important. And everybody matters. It's like we feel like a little rock in the little bitty piece of sand in the whole beach. And yet Jesus carried us and walked us to the beach. You know, he picked us up on his shoulders and shielded us with his armor. That way he got all the arrows in the back, and the bullets in the back, and the gossip in the back, you know, the backstabbing, all of it. You know, war wouldn't come between him and you. You know, he would defend you no matter what. He was the only child of God that was like, you know, only pure love. He was never exposed to pain before he come down from heaven. He was born in heaven. He was the child of God. It was his greatest sacrifice for him to come down here for us and actually subject himself to, okay, I'm ready. Even though I've never felt pain before, even though I've never had a bad memory or a bad experience or felt sorrow or lack of self-worth, I'm going to give that up and expose myself to the darkness of the people that I'm going to save. But they're going to realize, you know, that I did sacrifice that. That is the greatest sacrifice that could be ever made, because he was just pure love at the time. And then he decided to give himself up and for us, and experience that torment that he went through. You know, the lashings, the carrying the cross for long, you know, being up there, you know, nails in his hands to beat. You know, it was horrible. And so now he has to live the rest of his life with the memories of that. Memories is what ties us all together. You know, we could go back at any time and help heal our memories. Sometimes, even by science, you know, you could change something. There's a chance. You know, quantum physics is a great example of what to look for when you're looking to change something or alter something, or even make an example of yourself in your life. You know, because atoms, we are derived from the first particle of the universe, which is, you know, it's basically smaller than an atom, smaller than a quark. But, you know, one was X, the other one was Y. Everybody that is descended from that is XY. And the first element to ever exist was carbon. We are carbon-based. Guess what stars are also very much carbon-based. You know, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and helium, and a couple other things. But we are carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, and some H2O. So water and fire have always been around together, and I believe they experienced simultaneous and, you know, existence. Because you look at the quasars and stuff, sometimes they have trillions of gallons of water orbiting around them, more than the Earth's oceans. But yet they are on fire, you know? So, anyway. In other words, just keep sharing that story, you know? Whatever it is that makes you sing or makes you cry, it doesn't matter. Even dance, you know? It's worth sharing with somebody, because what if somebody is so alone in their journey, they can't pick themselves back up. And eventually, you know, all of a sudden this person doesn't show up to school. Everybody wonders where they're at. Well, guess what? She's laying at home in her bathtub, blood pouring out of her wrists, because nobody was there to share their story, and nobody would hear hers, even though there was no sound to be made. Don't let that happen to somebody. If you feel compelled, whether by God or your inner gut, do it. Every time I went against my gut, every time I went against what God has instructed me to do, I've walked up to complete strangers, okay, and told them every aspect of my life. And it was a transformation that I could never expect that would happen in that person. And they needed to hear what I had to say, what God told me to say, you know. It's not about being you or being all for yourself or whatever. It's about being united under one roof, under one nation, with no division. We're all equals here. Yes, there are some people that are a little bit screwy. You know, those are just, I don't know. They're the defects, I guess. I don't know. You know, really darkness got to them or something. Maybe they weren't, you know, born of light at all. Who knows? I'm not saying that babies are bad or anything like that. I'm just saying there are some out there that you wonder, like, okay, does he really truly come down from heaven, or did he come from somewhere else, you know? But sharing your story is as important as eating every day, you know, because if you don't eat, you're not going to survive. So in other words, if you don't share your story, there's a chance that somebody else might not be able to heal emotionally, physically, spiritually. and metaphysically, they got afflictions, and you can help them heal those afflictions, or help pick them back up just by simply talking and sharing, being a kind soul who's willing to sacrifice their own dignity and be, possibly humiliated or embarrassed or even shameful of things that they have done or happened to them, regardless whether it's in their control or not. Pain is an amazing thing. It can help transform you. No, not all of us have to carry that pain. It doesn't belong to us. It always comes from somewhere a little bit darker than what we can understand. A lot of times it passes down into families, sometimes from person to person just because of an act of violence. But other times it's just comes out of nowhere, and it hits you so hard and knocks you down that sometimes you can't get back up, not on your own. And I'm not saying, don't call for God, but God gives us the ability to help ourselves and to help each other. That's what he wants us to do. He wants us to prosper, be happy, be kind to others, and love people. And even our enemies can learn from this. Because if a light affects something of the dark, all of a sudden you have a light in the dark. Okay, guess what the light's going to do? It's not going to go out. It doesn't just do that. Light is eternal. When it's caught up in darkness, guess what? It's going to shine. And everything dark around it is going to be brightened up. So it can only get better. It's like, take humanity, for example. When a good person, basically, that is a good, generous, kind, selfless, with a big heart and plenty of room for mistakes to be made, and they forgive. You pair them up with somebody that maybe is cynical and distrusting and doesn't exactly have a good eye on what the world has done because they've been through nothing but trauma, and they're like, you know what, I'm tired of it, I'm done, I can't trust people, I don't want to trust people, I don't even want to trust myself to make good judgment decisions, and you start self-destructing from that point on, and you're not healing. So when you pair somebody like that with somebody of the other side that has been tainted by the darkness of the pain and corrupted, their heart's no longer ready to forgive, ready to accept you, ready to trust, ready to get on with their life, ready to move on. They'd rather just hide or become a complete bully to others. But you pair them with somebody that is a good person like that is very forgiving, very trusting, never had a hurt in their life. Or maybe they have hurt, but they've healed from it and overcome it. To give everybody the benefit of the doubt to an extent. Use your wisdom. Your inner gut will tell you if it's a bad situation or not and what you should do. Always listen to your gut. It never lies. You might be missing out on a blessing if you don't listen to it, or you might be avoiding a car accident if you listen to it. It goes from extreme to extreme. So share that story with somebody. Let them learn from you. Maybe even share with the world if you're comfortable enough. I'm not afraid. I'm doing it right now. So don't let somebody get so alone in their struggle for life, to survive, Don't let them get so alone to where they decide this life isn't worth living anymore and they want to exchange it for something else. I'm going to post the number to the National Suicide Hotline for anybody that is going through trials and trouble and just feels like they ain't got no hope. Forgive my, country slang, but this isn't a place for sheep. This world wasn't made necessarily for sheep. The wolves are out there, and they're there to devour. But there's something even darker that even wants to devour the wolves. So they're just running from something, trying to survive. The people that hurt you are running from something, or something was done to them also, that they cannot disrupt that cycle. They feel obligated just to keep it going, or they can't help but the fact to give in and go on like that because that's the only thing they ever knew. A bully doesn't bully unless they've been bullied most of the time. Or they just have no concept of what kindness and stuff is. They need to be taught or shown the light to, without an example to follow, they're not going to do right. You know, some of us are just born intuitive, and we know what the right thing to do is, and what's right and wrong is not determined by the soul. It's determined by the folks. You know, the people around each other. You know, you get good positive results out of something, that means you did the right thing. But if you get consequences and things go awry, that means you probably did the wrong thing. But it's subject to what you define it as. It's not a general right or wrong. There's no real law for it unless you follow the Holy Book. That's a good example of a guide by to live, because if you live by that, you get good results out of life. You know, it's kind of a no fail. But if you are out here trying to determine what's right and what's wrong, you don't know what goes up and down, heaven to hell, what are you? You know, you got to have a good sense of intuition about yourself, or look at a light as an example and follow that light. Be part of that light. You know, grow it. Be a part of it. Even if you feel dark inside, go to that person that has all the bright smile and their eyes are lit up like they're on fire for life, on fire for God even, you know, because the only thing they can do is infect you. It's contagious, just like laughter's contagious, yawns are contagious, smiles are contagious. You know, an angry person's also contagious too, but, you know, people end up getting scared of the angry person. So just be a happy person. Nobody's scared of happy people. You know, they might get annoyed by it if they're miserable themselves and don't want to listen to it, and they feel the need to wallow in their own misery. Well, they do say misery loves company. But if you're such a bright light to them that it's impossible for them to get away from you, you know, you're going to infect them with that light, and it's going to grow. So only good things can happen from that. So share your story. So be a good person. Try to, you know, do right by your family, your friends, your acquaintances, because you never know what they're going through. It could take one word, one bad word, or just as something as simple as, wow, your hair looks interesting. Well, they might take that as, oh God, that was the last straw on my back. I might as well just end it now. So be careful with the words that you use, because the power of life and death is truly in the words that you speak. And the words that you speak is like a magical spell. It has power. It has a lot of power. So think about that for a while. Bye.